Welcome, everyone. My name's Randall Cook, and I'm the chair of the Nesquin Community Plan Steering Subcommittee. And we're here at beautiful Hot Creek Gallery. Thank you for coming out this evening. And it's a lovely venue, so we're very, very grateful to Michael for making the gallery available. And we have a good crowd here. So we're going to hear from Sarah this evening about SB 406.
That's right.
And she's going to present both in speaking and through visuals and maybe some illustrations. So we're so looking forward to your illustration.
Oh my gosh, let me bring down the ratings of this place here. Thank you. And thank you, Michael. All right, so hi, everyone. I'm going to sit here for just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So tonight we're going to talk about Senate Bill 406. So for folks in the room, I did bring some copies of some handouts. Thank you for helping to do that, Lori. These are also, I emailed these to Jeff earlier this afternoon. So to ask him to post them on the website. So if you don't have a copy today, they will be on the website. For committee members, if you have copies with you, please keep them because they're going to become part of our work later as we continue to work through regulation updates for implementation of 406. Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and put the presentation up so folks online can see. I will not be able to see my chat or anything. So if anyone has a question, Jeff, can you please let me know?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay. That's not what I wanted. I'm just, we didn't have the lunch meeting. Let's see if that, Jeff, can you see the presentation?
Looking great.
Okay, can you see do you see the slide deck on the side or the presentation as a whole?
I see the presentation itself, I don't see PowerPoint.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let me put that. All right, okay, let me do this. Perfect. Okay.
Oh, it's back.
Yep, it did.
Oh,
I just
okay.
want to test it. All right, okay, so long-awaited conversation about Senate Bill 406. So I have quite a few slides. Some of them are visuals. I'm going to talk about how we can start thinking about how this work will get integrated into your local regulations and where the committee and the community have opportunities to provide feedback and to look at some of the development standards that we can consider. So for those of you who may not know, just a quick update. The legislature and the governor passed Senate Bill 406 during the last full legislative session. So that bill was signed last summer. And what it does is for Tillamook County cities and unincorporated communities served by water and sewer, it requires us to amend our residential zoning districts to allow for up to 4 dwelling units on a residentially zoned piece of property. So that's what it is. It doesn't say that. It does not mean that the quadplex ferry, as we talked about at the planning commission meeting, is going to come down and you're going to wake up one morning and there are going to be quadplexes everywhere in your community or elsewhere in Tillamook County. What it means is that this is another opportunity to provide housing options for people who want to live and work in our county. So, quick update. So what is middle housing? Middle housing, we already have accessory dwelling units. That's something that's already in our land use program for unincorporated communities. What that also means is duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhomes. So that goes up to those 4 units and cottage clusters at 4 units. So the common theme is everything is uses with clear and objective standards up to 4 dwelling units. So we got some illustrations here. If you can see them, just kind of people ask, well, what is that? You can see, but
I'm sorry to ask a question right at the start, but you said areas served by water and sewer. If
Correct.
they are not, these
they don't apply. That's correct.
Thank you.
Yep. So you have there's a triplex, can see a quadplex, there's a cottage cluster, and then, another fourplex, it's a row of townhomes there.
Sarah, is a cottage cluster for cottages?
4 cottages.
Got it, thank you.
Right, so thank you. Yes, so and those are detached units, right? Typically no more than 900 square feet is what those are. So. Project jurisdictions, so cities are Bay City, Garibaldi, Tillamook, Wheeler, Manzanita, Nehalem, Rockaway Beach. And then communities are Barbie, Twin Rocks, Watsiko, Cloverdale, Kibo, Neocon, Nesco, Meatars, Oceanside, and Pacific City Woods. So these are all of the communities and cities served by water and sewer that are part of this. DLCD awarded Tillamook County a $250,000 technical assistance grant to do this work following the passing of the bill. Everyone except Manzanita, Nehalem, and Rockaway Beach are using the same consulting firm. And I have not put it up yet because actually was out of the office last week, seeing my daughter, but the recording from the Planning Commission. We had a special meeting on June 27th. I will be posting that meeting where the consultants and I presented to the commission and talked more about Senate Bill 406. So I will put that link on our homepage. So if anyone wants to go and watch that meeting, you're welcome to do so. Yes, sir.
Forgive me if you're going to talk about this, but I'm interested in the rationale on why Tillamook County was singled out on all counties in the state and why unincorporated areas were specifically included.
Sure. So that's a great question. So we have a housing shortage. We have a housing commission who's invested several thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to try to better understand what our housing needs are countywide. One of the biggest reasons why unincorporated communities were included in this is because there is no city between Tillamook and Lincoln City. So there is a 45-mile stretch where typical housing regulations, unless we voluntarily do them. Tillamook County is a front runner in the state of Oregon for exploring ways in rural counties and coastal communities to figure out how to address housing needs and housing shortages. And so that is why we were chosen. That is why we went to the legislature and asked if they would consider Tillamook County taking a step forward to do this work.
So
Yes,
your
sir.
committee asked for this to happen?
The county asked for this to happen. Thank you.
What control Tillamook County still have over this process? If somebody wants to build one of those in the middle of Nestor?
Sure, so Nescoin is an unincorporated community, so you fall under county regulations, right? So we are responsible for your zoning regulations, you're responsible for compliance, building permits, etc.
Can we stop one of these?
No. No, that's part of it is moving forward with clear and objective standards. So basically what it means is that if someone wanted to build a duplex on their property or a triplex or a quadplex, the same rules that apply to construction of a single family dwelling will apply to construction of one of these premises. Yes, ma'am.
Are you talking about the place between Nesco and Lincoln City? But it's mostly wooded and then the swamp land that is protected. Where would you open that for building and rezoning?
So it's between the city of Tillamook and the city of Lincoln City. There are no cities, right? They're all unincorporated communities. So that's why we are working within the unincorporated communities that are essentially urbanized like a city. You have the same density, you have the same water and sewer, et cetera, that those other cities have. So you're unincorporated, but you're largely urban. In terms of what state definitions are. Yes,
Water and sewer. not
That's
one
right.
or the other.
Not one or the other. It has to be both. Correct. Yes, ma'am.
So Sarah, with this, is there anything to stop this from becoming just more vacation homes and more vacation rentals? Or will it be actual workforce housing? And how do you determine the difference?
That's a great question. Okay, so I'm gonna try to piece that out. And if I missed something, please let me know. Okay, all right, so We did a lot of work with updating the short-term rental regulations for the last 2 years. And there were some key updates in a forward vision of how do we balance housing stock needs for people who want to live and work here and housing stock needs for our vacation and tourism entities, our industry that is always the spend one standing in our communities. So one thing that happened was that there is a prohibition on renting out multiple units in multifamily dwelling. So what that means is in a duplex, triplex, fourplex, at most, you can get 1 license. Okay, with that, there's an ownership limitation now. So moving forward, any new license applicants cannot have an ownership interest in any other licensed short-term rental in unincorporated development county. And there's provisions in there that talk about liability corporations and others as well, right? So if you have an ownership interest as a member of an LLC, that counts.
So the short-term rental business that was just finalized recently, is that still in play?
Yes, it is. Yes. And so you've got the ownership limitation, you've got the number limitation, and you have the cap limitation, right? So now there's a cap, there's a ceiling on the number of licenses a community can have. So all of those things were done not only in anticipation of Senate Bill 406, but just that overall effort to look at housing stock within our communities in our county and make sure we're doing our best to try and some balance. So, and then did I miss something in the question?
And,
Okay.
and is that cap, is it a 30%, 20%?
For Nesco, I think it's 20% with a hard number with that. So even as development occurs, until we adjust the cap, that number will not move.
Okay, and then there's currently a waiting list of
That is correct. I think
how many?
I think there's 7 people on the waiting list. Yeah, and we're coming back to the cap discussion in September because we're not done with that. So stay tuned. Guy, and then so
Yeah, so sorry, the other part of Lynn's question was about affordable housing.
yes,
And I know that Senate Bill 406 states that it's one of its goals to provide affordable housing, but at the planning commission hearing that we had, when we were working with the consultants, there was no path forward to ensure that any additional units would have to be affordable housing. Okay? So
Correct.
maybe you could speak to that a little bit about how 406 really addresses affordable housing.
I would love to. And that's going to be one of my slides. These questions are all great. Just know we might hear some of this or brush over it later. So what Senate Bill 406 does not do is guarantee affordable housing. Right, but let's talk about what the definition of affordable means. Affordable means that your rent or your mortgage is no more than 1/3 of your income. So that can be proportionate. Affordable is proportionate to everyone in this room. Workforce housing has a defined amount of no more, it's called area median income. So HUD and others do these studies, they populate these studies every year that talk about based on how much you earn, this is the area median income, and then that number is broken down from 100% down to 30%, and from 100% up to 120%. And within those brackets, based on your income, you could fall within what is called workforce housing, low-income housing. There's all these different terms for housing based on affordability in terms of what you make in relation to the area median income and what someone is charging for rent. So the lower you go in your rent, meaning you're going into that workforce or that low-income housing bracket, typically that's where you see a lot more tax incentives and different things that start coming out to help incentivize that type of construction. With middle housing, this is what we know. I've been working in community development since 2000. 24 years. Give or take. I've known all of our local contractors and our developers during that time. This is what they built. This is what they can build. What we also know is that apartments are not the solution everywhere. They don't have to be the only solution. So what 406 does is it opens that door for up to 4 units to be built locally here. We know we need market rate housing. We know we need housing that exceeds or is at that 120% AMI. If you think about your nurses, your doctors, other types of professionals, what we have is a gap. We have incentives and opportunities for people that want to develop workforce and low income housing. But when you think about working professionals that exceed those income limits, we don't have anything. It's literally a desert. So what this does is it provides a path forward for an alternative housing approach. And part of what Senate Bill 406, so there's 2 pieces to Senate Bill 406. The first part are the zoning and regulation updates that we're working on now, that we're talking about today. The second piece is housing production strategies. So this is where the incentives come in to look at middle housing, specifically a triplex or a fourplex. Tillamook County has already created and implemented 3 different housing production strategies. We've done the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. We have a property tax exemption program for 3 units or more. If you rent within that 120% AMI, area median income, you can qualify for up to 10 years of a property tax exemption. And we were able to get Manzanita and Bay City to also participate in that program. The other one is the revenue from the short-term rental operator license fees. And so 75% of that revenue generated annually goes towards housing initiatives. Things like Kingfisher Apartments in Pacific City Woods, they were a recipient of some of that money. And so in the last couple of years, we have helped create and made possible funding for around 160 new units countywide for workforce housing. So triplexes and quadplexes will fall into the realm of those housing production strategies that we have already done on. So that's how we will find that path to find ways, not only to incentivize, but to make, for those who want to do this to rent, we will find ways to help make that possible. Okay. All right, so just talked about this, couple things. Our deadline is June 30th, 2025. So part of my job between now and then is to make sure all of our unincorporated communities and our cities all have all of their residential zoning codes updated to allow up to 4 units as an outright permitted use. So that'll require public hearings with the county commissioners, the planning commission, and then the city planning commissions and the city councils for those cities. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry for the pedantic question,
No, it's okay.
but does the bill or distinguish between an actual sewer system and a hybrid system, which would be what most of Nescoin is, where solids are pumped, stored in pumps, and the rest of it is not.
It does not,
Why not?
because ultimately you have a sewer service district for the community of Nescoin. But in terms of availability, right? So just jumping ahead a little bit to dovetail off of your question. Even today, development does not occur unless a water and sewer availability letter confirming service is available is submitted with the building permit. Right? So you gotta have, if you want to build a triplex, I need a letter from the Nescoin Sanitary District that confirms that there is capacity for 3 units.
Thank you.
Yes, you bet.
So Sarah,
Yes.
there are a lot of parts of within our community boundary
Mhm.
that are not served by the sewer district.
right here for one.
Right.
Right here for one. So if Michael wanted to build a triplex here or whatever, but he's not on the sewer system, but he's within the community boundary, do these, since we are writing our zoning ordinances for everything within the community boundary, does that cover people who, like Michael, who are within the boundary but not on sewer?
Yes, and thank you for asking that question because.
I was gonna ask.
Okay.
I didn't-
For those of you that attended the land use seminar, we talked about statewide planning goal 14. And part of that conversation, if you recall, was you cannot have sewer outside of a designated community boundary, right? But in a community boundary or city limit or UGB, you can share a septic system. You cannot share a septic system outside of a community boundary, UGB or city. So going off of the example for Michael, if you wanted to build a triplex, you can, and you can have a shared septic system to do that, or a wastewater treatment system.
Very
Yeah,
well.
that's right.
It seems contrary to what you said a while ago about having water and sewer system provided by.
But we know that even in our cities, not all properties are served by, they don't have the sewer infrastructure to them yet, right? Bay City just spent $60,000 on a new pump station to help support a new 60-unit development that's coming in their city. So it's just, it's the piece of allowing more than one dwelling unit in these areas where outside of communities and cities, that's not that. And most of your zones already allow for multiple dwelling units on a property, regardless of if they're served by sewer or not. So we're just essentially adding to that. But even in your lowest density zone, you're already allowed to choose. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to take a tiny step back,
Sure.
just to ask, is this an issue of if you build it, people will come? Because there's not that many new jobs, hanging around, many people are not. And do you have data which shows that if there was housing, there would be jobs?
I can share with you stories upon stories of business owners and others countywide that have said we can't hire employees because we don't have a place for them. So we're not necessarily even talking about build it, they will come. What we know is because we have a rental desert, we don't have enough housing units for the people that are here already. And it's not just Mesquite, it's countywide. So it's going to be a combination of both. It's going to be people that will move here to fill jobs, and not just in Mesquite. Think about Pacific City, think about Lincoln City, think about Tillamook. There's the average commute, this I know statistically, the average community level worker in Tillamook County is 45 miles each way. Because they cannot find a place. So, I'm gonna come back to it because I will have some more information for you. We completed a housing needs assessment in 2019. And we looked at unincorporated communities as well as the cities. And we, this year with the Housing Commission, are going to be updating that. So if you're interested in following that, the Housing Commission meets the first Thursday of every month at the Port of Tillamook Bay Conference Center, and their link is also on our website. So more of that, more current data than the 2019 data will be coming forward as we do that.
And you're looking for people to serve.
We are, yes, yes, we've got subcommittees, we've got the commission, it's a very active group. So, yes. Okay, so,
Sarah?
yes,
Do you want to mention the fact that the Senate Bill 406 does not provide funding for the construction of this housing?
it does not, thank you.
Nor does it provide, to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, incentives to contractors to create this.
Senate Bill 406 in and of itself does not provide funding to do that work. But part of our work as a county and the cities is going to be to look at housing production strategies once the zoning piece is done. Like the property tax exemption, like the things we already have in place.
Right, the TLT thing, there are incentives connected with that too.
Well, for transient lodging tax. We have discretion over 30%, but right now that all goes to public works. But yeah, that's coming back around too. There's a lot of good conversations on the table with the county. Yes, ma'am.
Since we're just talking about our next. What areas here are buildable with this?
Oh, so any of your properties that have a a residential zoning designation are eligible. Now, size, setbacks, things like that will help determine the number of units, right? So, I mean, there's still provisions for proportionality. There's still a parking requirement. There's still a building requirement. So we're gonna go over some of that, but again, it's the option. You know, we're creating that option. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and are you going to be rezoning anywhere to be able to, accommodate some of this building?
So there are no plans to rezone any areas in Nescoin. What we're going to do is look at the residential zoning districts and amend them to allow up to those 4 units outright with clear and objective standards.
And the building measures here, can't be here for a month. Just as we have the short-term vacation rentals, is there a possibility that the investment area could also have this building?
No.
So if the 11 Lincoln City that's not even in our county decides they need more workspace, they can come over here because one of the tenants away from there. And we don't have a lot of places here, so they're going to consider. So, and we're seasonal here too, so it's not like there's a lot of workers here. And one of them is like the Lincoln City. So I'm just worried that we're going to become a little hub for affordable housing for the bigger areas. That's Lincoln City.
So I will leave it to the work that we're doing is to provide clear and objective standards to build duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and a cottage cluster to 4 units, irrespective of the type of people for affordable housing or not that live in them, or if they become that term of affordable housing or not. That the focus and importance of this effort is just to have options in our zoning regulations for people who want to live in Berkshire. Meaning in Nescoin, meaning in Tillamook County. So that's the.
Hi,
So
Sarah.
Yes. Oh, hi, Jeff.
Yeah, so we have a couple things in the chat. One is a request from Nancy that you repeat questions aloud because they're pretty hard to hear. We hear you well, but if you can repeat, and from Helena Brecky, noting that a large, quote, single family home, unquote, with 8 bedrooms might use more sewer and water than a triplex that has 3 1 or 2 bedroom units. 3 cheers for stewarding our resources well versus just worrying about whether something called single family or is called single family or multi-family.
So Jeff, are you asking me if a single family dwelling with 8 bedrooms is?
I'm reading from the chat, so I think that my interpretation is that Helena just wanted to bring to attention that when people are concerned about what the usage of water and sewer resources, a big house, like one big house maybe would use more resources than several like middle housing units. So
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Okay. All right. So we've been talking a little bit about this. So housing needs. We have high and rising home prices, right? So we have a very competitive market. There used to be a coastal market and an interior market, right? So coastal market would be Nescoin. Interior market would be Tillamook. There's no difference now. The cost of home prices has shot up so much everywhere that what we're seeing is they're for our workforce, they cannot financially compete in the real estate market to purchase a home. And one of the things about 406, because you could take a duplex, triplex, fourplex and turn it into townhomes with individual ownership, it also now creates an opportunity for a more affordable home ownership opportunity, right? So it may result in long-term rentals. It may actually result in ways for long-term home or for actual home ownership. So Habitat for Humanity. And so Marion County is very interested in this because townhome development with individual ownership means that there could be opportunities for people to own a home that maybe could not own one in Tillamook County. We have very low vacancy rates. It's almost zero for long-term rental stock. Challenges, we are in the state of Oregon. Again, for those of you that attended the land use session we did, we got some pretty tight regulations here in the state of Oregon that trickle down to our county. The housing projection is we need at least 2,300 new dwelling units in the next 20 years to meet housing demands countywide. That doesn't count for the shortage we have now. That's just what we know we need moving forward. So again, with the updates to the housing needs assessment that we're going to be doing this coming year, I'll be curious to see what that looks like. So that does not mean 2,300 new dwelling units are coming to Nescoin. What that means is in 20 years countywide, that is what the projected housing needs of our county are going to be. That's not all workforce too. That takes into account vacation homes, retirement, that's the whole thing. It's not just workforce. A variety of efforts are underway, being led by the Tillamook County Housing Commission, and we talked about those strategies for housing production. Okay, so project objectives. Want to expand opportunities for middle housing in Tillamook County incorporated communities and cities. This is one of our ways to explore strategies to address our housing needs. And again, that compliance date for zoning code updates by June 2025. So a couple of examples of duplexes. Just wanted to show you, give you guys some visuals. So these three are visuals are duplexes. Here are some triplexes and quadplexes. So one of the things that we can talk about, we're going to talk about a little bit later, is development standards. We can, as long as we are not, thank you for coming. Thank you. As long as we are not creating barriers to development, we can look at things like, do we want them to have a pitched roof? Or maybe a front porch, right? Something small, architectural features, windows. This was the consultants did a really nice job of going through some of those options with the planning commission. So we're going to go back through those with the committee. But, you know, we do have some opportunities for feedback. These are townhouses. And then a couple of cottage clusters. You can see again, roughly 900 square feet. They can have parking behind them. They can have a shared parking area with pathways. So there's a lot of options there. And then, yeah, so just a couple of other, you can see where you got a couple of clusters. Now, obviously, this goes beyond the 4 units, right? So let's say there is a city or a community that says we'd like to allow up to 8 outright or 12 outright, which is possible. We just have to meet the minimum 4. And I'm not saying that someone wants to do that, but just here's some designs of cottage clusters that obviously exceed 4, but you can see where they have their routes or their drive, their parking, etc. You can do that as a lease option, or there's also options for home ownership of those units. So lots of options there. So middle housing land, So for a townhouse, you would have a larger parcel that is, where did I put those? Oh, right here. Okay, there we go. Right. You had an area of land. Here. So basically you have your setbacks, where you guys actually see that quite a bit right now, so it's a hardly. That's right. Yeah. So. 2, 3 townhomes, they own their units. And then the ground around them is held as common. And you have, so as you saw, there's pathways up to each one, little garage, some landscaping, so you can do that as a fourplex. There's some provisions that will, if someone starts, so this happened actually in Happy Camp and Beach Parks and a few other places. They start by building a duplex or a triplex, and then they want to turn it into some sort of townhome or condominium ownership. We are looking at our process of how we look at a land division for those, right? Because the property isn't divided, but all of a sudden the units individually encompassed by the interior and exterior walls become that area of land of ownership for that unit. And so there's processes right now on how you review those from a planning and a surveying standpoint. And we don't anticipate the surveying pieces to change or the state process for condominium flats or townhomes. But we are looking at some expedited land division options for something like this, because essentially if they're already built, they already meet the setbacks, they already meet the parking, they already meet various elements. Restructuring the unit in terms of ownership could be a more simplified process.
Are there builders champing at the bit here
Yes,
with this?
yes.
Because, like I said, I mean, there's so many layers of regulatory from the, tsunami, flood, seismic, geotech, setbacks, it's hard to know how a builder will make money without charging way past what is considered for mid-housing.
In my career, I have seen more builders and property owners, quite frankly, who would be willing to build a duplex or a triplex. They keep one side for their family and then they look at a long-term rental for the other side or sides that have walked away because of the process. Because the process can provide a layer of uncertainty the way it is structured now. Right? It can result in appeals. That may or may not, change the outcome of a decision by the department. But people walk away because they want those clear and objective standards to know if I do A, B, and C, even if I need a floodplain development permit, or I need to submit a geologic hazard report, I know if I do these things, I can build. But right now, the way a lot of our processes are set up, specifically with the conditional use review process, they walk away because there's a layer of uncertainty that's not been happening. And sometimes people, I don't want to say they become afraid of their neighbors, but these types of applications, generally in my career, have not been welcome in those areas. You become very adversarial when you get a letter from you that comes through me that someone in your neighborhood wrote. You kind of take pause on what you want to do. Over my career, the only time that I've had to call for law enforcement presence at a planning commission hearing is for housing. Because it has become so contentious.
And somebody was arrested.
That's right. We had one where someone was actually arrested. So when we think about why people don't do it right now, those are the reasons. just to be candid and honest, yes.
Very much, speak in general, about the following of the micro. We have zones here, like coastal hazard overlay,
Mhm.
we have tsunami, all that. What's the overall county responsibility in terms of increasing density within those zones, increasing the potential life threatening things versus need for housing? How do you balance this?
Thank you. So I'm gonna go back again to that land use session because we talked about goal 7, which is the hazard goal, and we talked about goal 18. We also talked about the shoreline goal, which is goal 17, and estuary, which is 16, right? So let's fold Guy into that question. Let's fold in the hazards and let's fold in the estuaries and the natural features, okay? So I'm gonna step away from the Nesquin Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone and that strip of the community that's part of that. And for those of you just kind of get some geographic bearing, it is all of the properties west of Brinker. And it goes in about 2 lots east of Brinkers. It goes up to south, it goes through South Beach, so some of Proposal Rock, following the ocean shoreline, it pulls in about 1 lot. All the way up to the top of Ocean Ridge. And then along Hawk Street, it actually does not touch any of the areas of properties that are developed, like the western half of those properties on Hawk Street. And it takes in about half of Nesquin, the west side. So I'm gonna just think that whole strip, that west strip of Nesquin, we're gonna step away from that for a minute. For everywhere else, we already comply with addressing risk reduction and mitigation through requiring a geologic hazard report for development, floodplain development permits, making sure we have setbacks from creeks and streams and estuarine areas. So just like now, when someone submits a geologic hazard report to build on a lot, one of the first things I have to look at is the identification of hazards. I have to look and make sure that the geoprofessional has confirmed the site is suitable for development, meaning it can be developed based on what the proposal is. The other thing, as a series of summary findings and conclusions that talks about making sure that the development will not cause an adverse impact or increase risk to adjacent properties. So those are things through an analysis that we are already doing for single family dwellings that will continue to occur with implementation of 406. So if it's a duplex or a triplex, now if a geologic hazard report is required, we're going to make sure that they're talking about the overall development in terms of ground disturbance, footprint, for a triplex. To someone's point earlier, we have some 8-bedroom homes. You could actually, if you took that building footprint, you might be able to get a triplex or a fourplex in there, right? So we're looking at foundation design and all of those elements of development that already apply. With the Nesquin Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone, I did some homework with the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. So that's the planning state agency, is kind of the umbrella to all of the local county and city planning offices. And with the work that was done and the findings that supported implementation of the Nesquin Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone and the density limitations in that corridor within that zone, that will remain unchanged. So for properties in that overlay zone, those density prohibitions and limitations still apply.
But not with the tsunami.
Not with the tsunami zone. Correct. But statewide, again, that precedence of single family, you've already got development occurring lawfully. There's no lawful right to do that in tsunami mitigation zones. This will be treated differently. We are one of the few counties. We were the first county actually in Oregon to implement the tsunami hazard overlay zone, to work on tsunami facility improvement plans and other work. So for development in tsunami areas, so our tsunami hazard overlay zone, if it's more than a duplex, we actually now already require evacuation routes and an analysis of making sure that when that development occurs, they know where to go and it goes in half for them to get there. So again, Kingfisher Apartments in Pacific City is that example of where we had to do that work with them. They have light of path, they've taken measures within the building to make sure people know if something happens where they're supposed to go. So I'm gonna continue to do the same. Okay, good question. Okay. So going back to what I said earlier, we had this conversation a little bit ago, less expensive does not necessarily mean it's affordable. But then also, working on code updates to remove barriers. So, right now, the consultants and I are going through all of the residential zoning districts, the cities and unincorporated communities. They're part of the implementation process. And we are looking at what is a barrier, what is stopping development, what should be occurring that's not occurring by way of development standards. So, one of there's a couple of key things that I can share today. For properties. So currently in Nestlewind, there is a 24-foot height limit for oceanfront properties. Now, with the Nestlewind Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone, we're not going to be looking at multifamily options, no housing options in that overlay zone. They're not zoned R3, right? Because that was the exception. R3 zone could have them, which I think is already most encompassed. Height limits have to be in these areas at least 25 feet tall. So right now for your oceanfront lots, you're at a 24-foot height maximum. Even though single family dwelling is only allowed in the overlay zone where your oceanfront properties are, we'll probably still have to bump that up to 25 feet for compliance. For 3 and 4 units, so your triplexes and quadplexes, you're looking at a minimum of 30 feet. We already have 35 feet in the ordinances, so there are some things that won't change. But again, we do have an opportunity to look at design standards as far as like some porches, pervious surface versus impervious surface, landscaping. So getting at stormwater management, some of the other elements that matter to the community by way of development. This will be our opportunity to look at that and look at some development standards that could be folded into construction. Things like Nestlewind currently has a 70% lot coverage maximum, right? So does everybody understand what that is and how that's measured? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, then I'll save you my terrible times. I'll have more. I'm just waiting. They're coming. If not today, soon. So that 70% doesn't have to go. Right, so things like that, we can still talk about. We can still talk about setbacks. The maximum setback you can require is 20 feet for a front yard. You're already there. Right, so there are some things already embedded within your zoning ordinances that don't have to change. Unless you as a community want to make recommendations to allow for something more flexible. So you could say, well, we support this, we want to see maybe a 10-foot front yard setback. Right, or 5 feet with parking. You know, we could do some options for a 5-foot front yard setback if people are parking behind the structure, right? So there's some options for flexibility there. So just let's see, what have I got? Go back here to this slide. Yeah, so the code updates are what we're working on. The consultants, I meet with them monthly. I meet with all the city planners and managers monthly. So 2 different meetings with everybody to check in on the work. As soon as the consulting team is done looking at Nestlewind, we go through their recommendations for code language to support 406. I will be bringing that forward to the committee and the community for discussion.
Question.
Yes,
You
great.
said that when they finish working on Nestlewind, is that working on it with each other or who's involved in that working?
So right now, the audits are the consulting team and myself. So it's the team of planning consultants that are being paid through that DLCD technical assistance grant.
What are they working on this?
So what they're looking at is they're looking at your current the language in your residential zoning districts to talk about, does this work? Does this comply, specifically development standards? What needs to be amended? What could be added? So based on my conversations with communities and cities, like one thing we talked about are like minimal landscaping requirements. Do we want to look at how much impervious surface should be on a lot, right? Because your lot coverage maximum does not talk about impervious surface. Doesn't talk about concrete, doesn't talk about patios made out of other materials. It is strictly structure, meaning the building elements.
So are they just reading words, or are they like looking at, like you can have the words say to the same building standards and go to two communities and see really different yards and ages of structures and street profiles? Are they doing this in like Portland, or have they been down, are they down here?
They have not been down here yet, but this is the work that we are doing together, because there may be some things where I'm like, no, this is very different, or let me help you understand this piece. They know we're working on the community plan updates. We've been going through the vision and values process. So those are things that I share with them, so that as they're looking at things, and again, it's going to be a suite. The must-haves are up to 4 units, right? There are some things that are just going to be in there. But there are other things that can be optional. So it's those optional things that, you know, we'll come back with and we'll talk about as a committee and a community to see how you guys feel about it.
I think one of the things on the next one concern would be there's certain design standards here or development standards that are more restrictive than the county. Specifically like the 70% coverage and the driveway width, maximum driveway widths. So those are a couple of just prime examples, but those are huge kind of factors. And, you know, so if you're looking at just going countywide and saying, well, let's just remove Nesco's special standard here, I guess that would be a concern, especially when you get into like the village where, you know, if you have a 50-foot wide lot, there's a lot of lots that are that configuration, and you know, the density is great, so it's just how you design it, right? I mean, that's the key. And so now all of a sudden, if you don't have a driveway, maximum driveway frontage, you can start getting, you know, a bunch of garages in the front that, and then buildings, you put more density on a lot, that puts pressure on the side properties. And if you restrict the 70% coverage requirement, now all of a sudden you sort of set up, you know, more problems. A lot of those can be solved with, you know, good design standards, but you know, every lot is pretty unique too. So that's the challenge, right?
Well, and I would say in every community, so most of our unincorporated communities like Muskegon have their own special zoning codes. Oceanside has a 50% lot coverage maximum, New Tarts has a 40%. They measure differently. They measure height differently than Muskegon. So part of this that we're doing too is, you know, trying to honor those pieces, those individual elements of each community, because you're all very different. Your lotting patterns are actually similar, right? So Nescoin has a lot of 25 by 100 foot lots. So there's Oceanside, so there's New Tarts, so there's Neoconi, Pacific City Woods. Everybody's got them. You know, the topography, we've all got similar geologic characteristics. Some have more predominant characteristics than others. But yes, to your point, there's a lot of that we're looking at to keep, and quite frankly, a lot of that we can keep.
Yeah, especially when you get like a 25-foot
Right.
wide by 100-foot lot, right? Well, you can do 4 units there in theory, but they're not going to have the frontage. So you would have one in the front, but then you're stacking behind, and now all of a sudden it's how do you orient those and how do you protect?
And you can, So the other thing is to parse out, and then Sarah, I'll get back to you. So under the rules, a single family dwelling and a duplex are one and the same, and actually building codes already treats them that way, right? They're both considered residential construction. If you have a lot of record, meaning your lot, Nescoin has a 7,500 square foot minimum lot size requirement for their R1 zone. But if you have a lot of record that is not 7,500 square feet, which the village is a prime example of several lots that don't meet that minimum, because it's a lot of record, you can still build. You have a legal lot of record, it was legally created, we're going to honor that zoning, you know, that property right to allow a dwelling. That will carry over for a duplex as well. However, for a triplex and a fourplex, we can require that that minimum 7,500 square foot lot size be met. So we won't, I mean, I'm assuming you don't want to be more flexible. If you do, please let me know. We will talk about that with the committee when those recommendations come through. But you won't see 4 units on a 25 by 100 foot lot, just simply because it's not going to meet the minimum lot size requirement of 7,500 square feet. Though we may see a small duplex.
Yeah, right.
Provided setbacks, parking, all of those things are still met. Sorry.
Just to follow up to, I'm sorry, Lauren, it seems like it would be helpful and important to have someone from Nesco in the room. Who knows the character of the community when you're talking about Nesco.
So the technical working group, that's why I'm here. I am your bridge, and we'll keep coming back and forth. And we are hoping to get the consultants either here or joining us on a Zoom meeting. But we would also hope that those of you interested in the community with the planning commission meeting and other meetings we have coming up, that we would also jump onto those so that we could get your feedback there too. There's going to be several public engagements where the consultants would be involved.
The consultants are bringing recommendations to you or.
To bring here.
And
Correct.
not be hopeful to have input earlier in the process as opposed to, here's what we propose to do, and we think it's great.
So there are some things that have to be done, right?
Sure.
Right.
So
So,
there's different ways of doing.
so no, there's not. The things that have to be done a certain way will be done a certain way. But the options for other things, that is what we are going to talk about as a community. And then I will bring that back to talk about what the community prefer. So that is mine. We are doing more community outreach and engagement right now than anyone else. And I would say Nescoin and Oceanside are the two communities that are really moving forward with this. We're investing quickly. We're having a bunch of meetings and talking about this stuff. So I am confident that we will be able to bring those ideas back into us. Especially at a break committee here to do that work. Yes.
I'm curious about the parking requirements, and I'm wondering if within our community plan, we can address things that we prefer, perhaps subterranean parking rather than on-street parking, because it impacts fire and safety.
Right. So the parking requirements will be, so what we can require is 1 parking space per dwelling unit. The model ordinance,
I mean, that's what doesn't even come close to that village.
I'm looking at this triplex, thinking if each person has 2 cars, that's 6 cars. So if only 1 is required on each and the other 3 have to be somewhere else. If we put them on the public right away, that's going to increase congestion.
right, so there's the administrative rules for middle housing, and then there's the model code. And there are some nuances between the two. There are options if you want to put them in your zoning codes to allow for on-street parking. I would recommend it's probably not something we want to do to qualify to meet parking requirements. I think those parking spaces need to be off-street, just like they are now. So, then working through those pieces with Chris Lady, the public works director, to talk about if there are communities that might want to consider using on-street parking to qualify and meet those parking requirements for dwelling units.
Just go and say, no, we don't want the on-street.
Absolutely, and
Not be part of that.
That's actually been
important for
one
them,
of
like,
my
anyway.
conversations with him. I mean, especially working through so many other things, including the short-term rental ordinance updates and others, like, you know, he and I both feel that on-street parking in Nestwin is not ideal. Right, so they would have to meet on-street parking requirements. Tillamook, Pacific City. There might be other areas of the county that say, yeah, we're good. If we can, you know, if they can meet parking, we'll allow up to so much on-street parking. And if they feel differently about that, then we can add that as a provision. But our commitment is one off-street parking space per unit.
I notice on the parking, the minimum, you may be talking about this in a second, so sorry, but you say that it could be set lower for mill housing, lower than less than
Less
one
than
space per
one.
unit.
That's right, yeah. So if the community wanted to, part of the feedback could be, you know, if it's a fourplex, maybe only 2 parking spaces, right? I can't see that happening, but there are other areas where it might, right? I mean, it depends on the location. So, you know, I don't see it going below the 1 per unit.
Hi, Sarah.
Yes.
I got one more comment or a couple more comments in the or another comment in the chat. And this is from Helena Brecky again. And she says, thank you, Sarah, for flagging that it could be important to require a certain amount of permeable ground that rainwater can absorb into, an important consideration for reducing both flooding and wildfire risk. Some families, including mine, have only 1 car. I guess this is a new comment pertinent to a different part of the discussion. Some families, including mine, have only 1 car. Also, if people who don't need giant SUVs, trucks, have smaller cars, you need much less space for parking, a win-win, including for affordability.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good question. I'm hearing all, and I understand the need to increase housing center, but it also means you increasing populations. What about services like fire, healthcare, ambulance, sheriff services? You know, right now, it's 45 minutes before any kind of response. We're lucky to have a fire station right close by, but they have to go for 5 minutes to go. My point is, it's still a county when we jump in and make, you know, this newly populated area have everything.
So I'm gonna go back to my initial statement. We don't have enough homes for the people that are here already. So I think for several years, our goal first and foremost is to provide housing options for people who are already here. The second thing is as far as services and availability. So we have a fully staffed sheriff's office. I understand what you're saying about response times. Some of those are seasonally based. With water and sewer, we're talking about availability letters before someone can build. We know there are many areas of the county that need infrastructure upgrades. So part of what we are doing is working on that as well right now, right? So through the legislature, trying to leverage dollars, finding grants and funds, we are seeing money come from the legislature. There's a big bill package to allocate funds for rural counties and communities to assist with infrastructure upgrades. So we're doing all of this work together. We need to develop, you need 3 things, right? You need zoning, you need money, and you need infrastructure. If we wait for 2 of those things to happen, we will never get there. Right? We have to start somewhere in building that path for development. So I don't expect anything to happen overnight. We're doing the work to get there. So if the infrastructure isn't there, it won't happen.
So do you, have you projected, I mean, Nestle specifically, I mean, you know, most people, I grew up here. It was 147 people here when I was a kid. I think there's what, 162 now. I mean, is, you know, it's a little different demographic, it's more farming and, you know, those people now seem more retirement.
It'd be interesting if we could get everybody. in
But I'm
the
saying
last
is that,
150 years.
is there gonna look,
Talk about change.
are we talking about our numbers actually increasing a lot? As far as, you know, this, until the county never has been coming down here for. It's always been a long time. Well, Matt and Roy were on the fire department, they were, back in the day, they were quick to respond. You know, this has never been a place that things. Services, you know, we're kind of the tail end of everything, so. I'm not speaking to your, I mean, it's kind of as it's always been. And is there gonna be a lot more people projected to actually live here full time?
I don't know. I can't answer that.
Within your, you know, your city,
So we know in 20 years, and then over the next 20 years, countywide, we need 2,300.
And Sarah, if you just allocate that across the county and jurisdictions, what's the likely range of build units in estimate, just a range?
So that is some of the work that I'm doing now to bring to the committee. So one thing is a GIS analysis of how many of your lots are 7,500 square feet or bigger. Right, because really that's, I mean, I think, you know, if a single family dwelling or a duplex can go on a lot of record, setbacks, building height, etc. We're really talking about for those larger units is how many properties do we have that will meet that size to get it, and then I think we will have a better way to answer that question. Yes, guy.
Sarah? Do you think that DLCD would, given that Senate Bill 406 prioritizes housing for residential zones, that we can use this opportunity? You know where I'm going.
Yeah, go ahead, that's a good question.
With removing non-residential uses from our key residential zones like Powell, especially. That's, you know, it's a concern of mine. And I think when I look at the bill and think about our need to prioritize housing in these spots, the last thing we want to see is somebody do something else.
So, couple of things to answer that, and thank you for asking that question. So first, so we've got two pieces of that conversation here in Weston and elsewhere. So one, when we look at the planning program, when we look at the statewide goals and the comprehensive plan, we talk about what uses are needed or may be needed, right? So when you talk about a conditional use, you have uses permitted outright in zones, which are primarily single family dwelling, duplex in Florida. You know, I think your R3 zone actually allows for them already.
Right.
Farm forest uses in some of those, etc. And then you have your uses permitted conditionally, which can be things like a fostering home or a mixed use development that is part residential, but could offer some wraparound services to support residential development that maybe isn't in your very limited commercial core. Those are all there because it was already determined that that was consistent to allow those uses outright or on a lot by lot review basis in your zoning designations. Some of them under federal and state law, like foster homes, rehabilitation centers, etc., we cannot remove, right? The other piece is when we start, if we started looking at the existing zoning codes and started pulling out uses that have already been adopted as uses that may be allowed outright or conditionally in your zones, that could be property rate seeking. So that means that if the county takes away a use that's allowed in the zone, someone could say you have diminished the value of my property. And so we are not in a place in this process to do that.
In my argument is that we now have best backing to do that with Senate Bill 46. Or Tillamook County. And it's pointed out, we're the only county that's within the Senate Bill 46. For non-cities.
And for now, I would say, I think this is
Another
going
county,
to change
yeah,
in the future, yeah.
But we have a bill that says we should prioritize housing for residential, in residential zones. We have DLCD backing this and administering the changes. It just seems that if there's ever a time to go into an argument, that says, we're gonna remove somebody from having horses on the lot and for feed in Nestwood. Now's the time, because we can, the argument we have, now I understand the financial. First of all, you're gonna get, somebody's gonna say, hey, wait a minute, I may want to put my horses on that. So you're gonna get, and I understand the limitations of the county financially, because we just been through a lot of expense with SDRs. But boy, is this an opportunity to really make those changes, so it's, I wish we could do that.
I appreciate you saying that. And there are things we're still continuing to look through. So just like the consultants, DLCD representatives meet with us to go over different pieces of this along the way. There, conversations like that that are not lost on me. So that is also part of the discussions as well. I think the prioritization piece comes in by allowing them operate. Again, this is where you have those clear and objective standards. And that's what prioritizes that type of use.
And as long as those conditional uses are there. And maybe even one of the criteria for conditional use is, does it in fact impact county housing needs?
Yes.
And maybe that's the way you address it.
Right, and that is actually already there. When you look at, thank you for saying that. So in the conditional use criteria number 2 requires an analysis of consistency with applicable comprehensive plan policies. So we always told them something about Hilton, which is the housing piece.
But you said last time that parts of 406 are not going to go into account.
That is correct. What I'm talking about are those other uses allowed conditionally in the zone. So when you talk about prioritization, we always have an analysis in the staff report. If it's in a residential zone and it's not a residential use that's being proposed, we provide that analysis of findings of will this impact future residential development because of that prioritization piece.
Yes, how often the conditional uses are approved? Is it the majority or?
Oh, we're doing all the time. Yeah.
I mean, pretty much if you read the conditional use, and somebody's proposing it as a neighbor, can we figure, oh, well, they're gonna probably get it.
Most of the time, well, yeah, it depends. It depends on what it is. I mean, the Facebook cable proposal in Tier Del Mar was a conditional use. In the Nescoin area, I think in your Nescoin R zone, we looked at a conditional use for an accessory like a shop or a barn without a house, right? Because that's a conditional use. Nobody cares about those, right? The conditional use for the cable was an entirely different matter. So it depends on what it is and where it is. But we do, sometimes they go to the planning commission and sometimes we review them administratively and I make the decision based on the criteria.
And I can say that when they go to the planning commission, it's not.
Yeah, it's, yeah. And that's why they go there, is because if I think there's enough public interest, or this could be a precedent-setting decision, we're going to have to make findings on those criteria that then establish some sort of precedence moving forward, we'll absolutely go to the planning commission. There is a public hearing and they decide. I just provide the findings. So slide, I don't know if you guys had a chance to read this. So-
Sarah?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Nancy, before you go on, I just kind of wanted to jump on what Guy was saying. If there's such a need for more housing, why would zoning changes not be considered rather than high density zoning or housing within, say, the village? If there's, say, zoning right adjacent, is there any possibility that that would be considered?
We can consider rezoning parts of Nestone for higher density if the community wanted to explore that. But I have not heard anyone suggest that. I feel like I'm already skating on some pretty thin ice with the 4 units. But I mean, Nancy, to your point, yes, we could look at that. We could look at incentivizing more housing production if you wanted to rezone to higher densities.
But to reverse that, there are some residential areas in that R3. And that may want to get out of R3.
Yeah.
That might want to what?
That might, okay, so properties that are in R3 that might want to get out of R3.
Now, that would be taken, that would be a taking.
It would, I wouldn't be able to do that. Yeah, I can go up, but I can't go down.
Right.
Grant?
Well, I bring this up every now and then about the village considering relocation of housing out in a higher, safer place. And you've said, well, we're not gonna change forestry and resource areas to a place that would be safe for people to build up and out of the village. But it seems like this is another opportunity to say, well, we need, if we wanted more high density or fourplexes and things, and they could be out of the tsunami zone, so they don't get destroyed when the tsunami comes. Couldn't we look at some properties that are not in the central zone? But yeah,
Yeah.
I think the same answer is no.
State law, so going back to the statewide planning goals and state law, we cannot move that out. There's so like the criteria and the bar to meet to even consider anything like that is so high. My hope is that there might be legislative action one day to reconsider that.
Given the hazards that exist.
Yeah.
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 Okay, because I had.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you voicing that, and I believe it's a good piece.
Well, all my questions have had a negative character, and actually I support. You know, what happened, I don't build a lot of habitat houses. And I'm kind of mindful of the habitat model, which is find attractive land and start building houses. As opposed to, you know, wait for someone to own a house, tear it down and build some more houses there. There are actually, does the county or public entities own land in Toledo County where that model would be applied?
I cannot speak for all of the cities. That's a good question. So the question for those online was, are there any publicly owned lands in Toledo County, owned either by the county or the city, some other public entity? The county owns 40 acres in the Tillamook urban growth boundary east of town. So that is an area, property was acquired by the county a year and a half ago, right? I want to say Bay City owns some property, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. You know, one of the reasons why Lincoln City has been so successful in addressing their housing needs is because the city owned a bunch of property and they built on their own property. I know we do not have, at least as the county, we don't have that option. But thank you for your habitat work. That's awesome. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and change. Okay, so we talked about minimum parking space is 1 per unit. Driveway width and spacing requirements for parking is also something we can look at. So the consulting team is gonna give us some ideas of what that could look like. And they're gonna take a look at application of the 12 feet that is already in existence, and just to clarify that, that is the connection. That is not the driveway as a whole, it is the connection. Which means the connection to the road is 12 feet. But sometimes you will see driveways that end out. After that connection point, so it's the connection point that is 12 feet. For 25% of the lot, there's two options there. So we'll be taking a look at that. And then, again, one of the things that I will be bringing back to the committee and the community talk about are design standards, entrance orientation, window coverage, driveway and garageway width, cottage, cluster orientation. So, these will be things that we will be talking about later. Again, the consultants did a nice job of going into that a little bit deeper during their presentation with the planning commission. So, I'll be getting that link up, so anyone who wants to watch it. Yes, sir.
What solar shadow?
So question is, what about solar shadowing? Is that going to become part of the review? So solar shadowing is actually already addressed. It's addressed through your setbacks, your building height maximums, the distance between structures, right? So everybody has a minimum 6-foot separation between structures. If you're not in commercial zones, that's largely a fire, life safety and fire code requirement. So we already addressed those things.
Just with your experience in different counties, that's not how it's addressed.
In where, sir?
Once we set up a situation with different county,
Okay,
that's not how it's addressed
okay.
elsewhere in Britain. So I just wanted, you're talking about a 30-foot high structure, next to a single family dwelling, there's more than shadowing in a 6-foot range that you're talking about. So I was just curious about part of the
Yeah,
energy, and you live, if you have a fourplex, you know, where are you going? Are they going to charge your electric cars, and there's a substantial birds coming out of the windows to plug these, to power these cars on the streets, so they can, and maybe park close to their residents, but it seems to be, I mean, you're doing a fantastic job of accumulating all these what ifs, but there seems to be even more as part of the whole package.
so thank you for that. So we're talking about all of the what ifs. So what I would offer is today, under the existing zoning codes as they are written and adopted for Nescoin, a single family dwelling can go up to 35 feet. You know, all of the scenarios that you've shared can already, like, we see dwellings all the time, a single family dwelling that's up to 35 feet. Right, so I understand what you're saying. If we want to talk about like dark skies, lighting, different things like that, or look at some alternative setback requirements, those are things that we can explore. Because open space is important, right? Not just for, you know, the solar element, but that's, I know that matters to the community. So those are things that we can talk about. And I'd love to see if you have anything you want to tell me later about county. I'd love to take a look at that. Sisters, oh, sisters. So you're in Deschutes? Deschutes, okay.
Had to lower a house because on a half acre lot for the next one.
Oh my gosh. Are you in the city or in the county? Okay. Thank you. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so we talked about the hazards. We talked about goal 7, goal 18. So goal 18 is your Nescoin Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone. It is your requirement for doing an area development permit, which is basically your geotechnical evaluation, all of those which currently exist. When we had our land use session, we talked about goal 18 and where you can develop and where you can't based on dune classifications. All of that will continue to apply. Talked about the Nescoin Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone. Talked about sufficient infrastructure. We talked about sewer and water availability. We talked about a little bit about transportation and emergency services. We talked about short-term rentals, right? So we know we've got some regulations that are in place now in anticipation of this. One of the questions that I got in another community was, what about subdivisions that have CCNRs? that say only one dwelling unit, or, you know, they have different limitations. So the way the law is written is for any subdivision that has CCNRs, you're fine. They stay as they are. Right? But any new subdivision created cannot exclude middle housing. So if a new subdivision, let's say the golf course. Right, we had a proposal, what, 10 years ago, 15, right? If that came back. And someone wanted with their CCNRs, I would have to look at their CCNRs to confirm that they did not exclude middle housing opportunities. Another thing to note is an ADU counts as one of the 4 units. Right, so if you have a duplex and you want to do an ADU, that's 3. If you have a 4-plex, you can't do an ADU unless the zoning allows you to do more than 4 units. So that ADU also counts in the mix. Yes,
I would just add power to the infrastructure that's there.
Yeah.
Which is big infrastructure when you run out of bigger.
yes, and even today, many of you probably know this, whether it's a single family dwelling or you're dividing lots. You know, those costs are passed on to the developer for that new infrastructure that has to go in to serve the property. So that would remain this way.
Got, guy or someone on the water sewer, I mean, how many, there's not that much more capacity, is there?
In water,
Sewer. Well, I don't know about these, okay, I just didn't know.
the water,
Sewer,
we're generally,
yeah, water's fine. Yes. I mean, some of this might be almost moot in that there's a relatively small amount, I believe, capacity left for the sewer system without them upgrading.
Right, and part of, again, if someone, let's say, wanted to develop the golf course and subdivide it, you know, those infrastructure upgrades.
Well, the
to
beavers
serve
already
it.
And so we get very,
Oh, man,
very
it's
good.
the beavers with the bears, right? They just have like a couple of sports teams or something. Golf teams, you know. Okay, so just again, I think this is just reiteration, clear and objective standards. So basically, whether it's a single family dwelling, ADU, or up to a 4-plex. When someone comes into my office with a zoning and building permit application, it is a yes or no. Do you meet setbacks? Do you meet building height? Do you meet lot coverage? Do you have your water and sewer availability letters? Do you have your fire service letter? Do you have your rotor coach permit? Right? Do you have a geologic hazard report that's required? So that will continue to apply as it does now for single family dwelling up to those units. So it will be a yes or no, either they have to demonstrate they meet them or we don't need to issue them. And we talked a little bit about exclusions. We talked about natural resources again, building height, setbacks, land area ratios. We talked about that, infrastructure, and then emergency vehicle access verification. So right now today, if you build a dwelling, whether it's 8 bedrooms and 5,000 square feet or a 900 square foot cute little bungalow, you gotta have a fire letter with your permits that says that they can serve the area and that they can access the property. So that will continue to apply.
Excuse me, Sarah.
Yes.
I'm looking here and I'm not seeing actual, a definition of minimum setback.
No, because we get to decide. The only thing is we cannot require more than 20 feet. Right, for a front yard, and I think a rear yard is 10 feet. So as the committee, so this will be part of the committee work as we go through this piece. So tonight is the introductory conversation. Let's take a deeper dive into those details. But what I've provided for you, at least there's the executive summary and then the model code, which any of you want to read that, thank you so much. But I would stick to the summary just for tonight. Yes.
Just a quick add to your other considerations is emergency evacuation pathways.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nestle's done a great job already with wayfinding signage. And there's been some great work done here.
With, and, capacity, density increases.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, agreed. And then, let's see. Just got some facts here, so we might see infill. We talked about ADUs since the ADU ordinance for unincorporated communities was passed last year. We've permitted 3 countywide.
I'm sorry, could you?
3
Three,
ADUs
oh,
countywide. Countywide with the ADU ordinance for unincorporated communities. Now, what I will say again is, yes, there's only 3, but it was more of the option with a clear path forward for someone who wants to do.
why?
3. How many applied? 3. All 3 applied, all three got their permits.
On a lot of other laws, I guess.
Um,
How many exist before the thing?
oh my gosh, I have no idea. And I am sure there are a lot of people that don't want me to know,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, no, one pops up every once in a while, but at least the good news is now with the
Now
ADU
that-
ordinance, we have a path. Again, there's a path and there's a way forward. You know, sewer, water hookups, all that are entirely different part of the
So
conversation.
could those with already have ADUs, should they come to the county to get them somehow approved?
So this is where it gets sticky. Be real careful.
So the answer is no, they shouldn't come.
Yeah, well, it depends. So in all of the short-term rental license renewals, a lot of people have created a separate little dwelling unit so they can live there and rent their house out, or they kind of got some double timing going on. I'm looking at each renewal application myself. Going through the building permit records, going through the tax records to make sure it is a lawfully established dwelling. So I am reaching out to folks when I find out that they may have this unpermitted dwelling unit. And they can lose their license because now they have a violation and they're out of compliance. They don't have a lawfully established dwelling unit. The assessor's office, water and sewer districts, there's other ways. Sometimes we discover them. One of the big ones is when someone wants to sell a property and a realtor comes in, or somebody, their bank calls because they need a mortgage to buy it. And we can't verify that that unit has been permitted. And then sometimes that compromises their loan, or, you know, God forbid, if the house catches on fire. This actually happened in one community. There were major insurance issues because they had an unpermitted loan unit. And the house caught on fire. So you can imagine insurance companies are not always super helpful in giving us money when we need it. I'm glad we have a path forward. I just hope that folks that have units, I just hope that they eventually start coming to me. I would much rather try to work with them on the front end than discover something and we're all scrambling to figure out how to make things right. So that's kind of where we're at. And I know there's several units everywhere around this county, but you know, when I find them, I find them. But I hope we can permit some of them. The project approach moving forward.
Could you
Yes.
please select all the text on that slide?
I'm going to read it right now because I just realized it looks terrible up there.
Next time I'll try to block out that.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, so the star is where we're at. We are at initial presentations and conversations. We are working on some interviews. So the Housing Commission, which has a countywide representation. So Dave Bennett, who's a member of your community, is on the Housing Commission. The team will be interviewing and talking to the Housing Commission. It's either going to be the August meeting or the September meeting. I'm trying to nail down that date now. So the first Thursday of those months either starts at 9 a.m. either at the Port of Tillamook Bay Conference Center, or there's a link on our website if you want to attend virtually. Public comments are taken at the Housing Commission meetings. So if you wanted to jump in on one of those or show up, You could listen to the conversation and participate in that with the Housing Commission. We are also working now on the code audits and code concepts. There will be some open houses and an online survey that will follow that. So that's another way for community members outside of the land use committee to participate. And then I will be coming forward with some draft code updates that we will work on together. Start doing a lot of work back and forth. By April, I need to have final code updates done because my timeline is June 2025 to adopt. So final presentations will start after April. So what's happening now kind of goes back to that initial summary, working with the consultants, getting them all the information listed there. So they've got all of our codes, they've got our comp plan and zone maps, recent development permits that may be relevant. So giving them a couple of conditional use applications that I've done for duplexes and triplexes. Kingfisher Apartments is something that they are looking at. It was quite a process. The zoning for that development allowed for outright things like restaurants, grocery stores, things that had very high intense traffic volumes, you know, routinely throughout the day. Those uses were permitted outright. Kingfisher required that conditional use and went through several appeals. The question is, should that have happened in terms of what's allowed in that zone? You know, if we were looking at something that potentially wasn't as high of intensity as a use, you know, kind of one of those lessons learned things. So working with the consultants through all of that. Housing Commission, we're going to be meeting with them, getting some public meeting venues together outside of the work that we are doing. And then the last step will be working with the planning commissions and the city councils for the cities, getting ready for adoption by city councils and board of county commissioners. So just another visual of what that looks like. The technical working group is myself with the city planners, working with the consulting team.
When you say city planners,
Rockaway,
the
Garibaldi,
actual city,
yeah, the
so
actual,
folks who are a city are represented.
they are only represented right now by their planners that are hired through the cities.
Got it.
There has not been community participation in those series. Right, so we're ahead of we're ahead here a little bit. And part of that is just as communities that I want to be here. I don't want to wait until I have a draft document and bring it back to you. I'd like to get your input from the beginning and to make sure that you feel informed. So any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
In the event that one of these, you know, say a fourplex was built on a lot in Nestland, is there any restrictions on if those could be sold on the open market?
Unless they were converted to townhomes or condominiums, it will stay under one ownership, so you couldn't sell the individual units. They would have to be rentals.
And could they convert them to condominiums and sell them?
Potentially, yeah. But that gets back into. That could create an opportunity for affordable home ownership. Right? When we talk about, there's a lot of that concern about short-term rentals. But even on a scale of proportionality, you know, you may have some families, and a lot of the committee meetings that we've had, you know, one consistent message is we would like to see more families, we would like to see kids here. You know, this may be a way to do that, either by rental or by ownership of a unit.
I just, you know, circling back when someone said about the property county owns, you know, so, I mean, the county owns quite a bit up in the dunes. South of this, correct?
So the county still owns the vacated plats of Kiwanda Beach, which are west of Hawk Street. So they're between the ocean and the line of lots on Hawk Street. Those are zone recreation management. So they're not residential. And I looked at those properties years ago with Paul Levesque, who used to be the chief of staff I don't know how. With my recollection of the comprehensive plan policies and the statewide planning goals specifically related to rural 18 and others. I don't know if we could rezone that. I don't think so.
Well, I don't like to.
Yeah.
I'm just. Yeah, just down the road, you know,
Yeah.
that's a chunk of property the
Yeah.
county owns that
Yeah,
the county gets to
well,
declare zones, so.
and then that would, right, but we still have to meet the same criteria,
Right.
and that would be subject to the Nesco Coastal Hazards Overlay Zone, which has.
I just,
Yeah.
call someone, well, you do own actually. well,
So candidly, you know, because words out, our budget isn't great. Right, we've got some financial budget issues coming, so everybody's like, sell that. Sell that, financial problems could at least be addressed for a while. So it's what you're saying is like circulating, but I just, no one's actually asked me yet, but I just can't see that happening. I don't think that. There's some, you know, I mean, I think a blame thing could go there.
Yeah, just an idea, I mean.
Yes.
I think it was Mesa County in Colorado that incentivized donation in creative ways.
Oh.
And been partnered with that. Basically, they got a bunch of housing with by giving tax incentives and other
Yeah.
things, and then got Habitat partnered with them and for minimal investment created a lot of.
Thank you for sharing that. And when we get into the housing production space of the development of the housing production strategies for all of this, I would love to get your feedback. Because that's one of the things, so we're doing the zoning work, the housing commission with Parker, our housing coordinator, will really dive into the pieces that you're talking about. Dave Bennett is a sharp guy, incredible financial background, the work and the input he's been able
And
to
he's not my
contribute.
brother. Oh, my brother is me.
Yeah, but no, but I mean, those are the conversations that we will be looking to have after the zoning pieces.
Is that enough active zone?
It is, yeah.
Already, so.
I was gonna tell you that later. Yeah, yeah. No, they've built some, in fact, they built some nice houses. In fact, they just did their first townhome development in Tillamook.
Right. Next to us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
they
a house
did
right in the,
Hebo.
right,
Yeah.
you turn into Hebo on the right.
Yeah.
The great house.
And I think that was their.
It's really
first
nice.
Yeah, they're looking at some property that they own in Bay City, so right now we're helping them to develop that, and they have some property in Dearborn.
Hey, Sarah?
Yes, and I was trying to quit sharing my screen.
Yeah, that was, I was gonna ask you to quit sharing your screen so that people online can
Oh.
better see what's going on in the room. And also
Yeah.
a request from Nancy to, if we can share your slides, like Nancy asked for a copy of the presentation.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I gotta figure out how to. Let's see,
Find the Zoom.
let's see.
Might be at the top of your screen.
I lost you. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna hit that. Nope. Hang on just a sec. And let me do this. Okay, hang on. There's that. Let's see if I can. Oh, I think I'm getting there. Oh, and I do see Kevin is on. Hi, Kevin. All right. I don't know how. I'm used to having two
Let me-
screens.
Let's see.
Here we go.
Let me-
I think I'm getting there. Can you just like kick me out of the screen share?
Let's see, I'm gonna share my screen and then I'll stop sharing because that will, yeah.
Did that just work?
Let's see.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, perfect. There,
And-
got it. Thank you.
You need to clean up your desktop.
I know. Oh gosh, I'm still sharing.
Get rid of the bottom.
You know, no judging.
That's pretty impressive.
Thank you. I know exactly where everything is too. Am I still sharing?
Window into your life.
Oh, man. Okay, I am still sharing, aren't I?
No, you're not. You're good.
Oh, good.
Well, not on this side.
Okay. Oh, you can still see it.
Well, just close your computer, because.
Well, but then I'm afraid that'll stop. It's okay, you guys can just see. Yeah.
It looks good now. We can see all of you.
I am one of those people, yes.
So back to the example of somebody builds a fourplex, they turn them into condos. Different people buy each of their condos, then can those become for short-term rentals? They're all single, owned by single people?
Well, that's the question. That is the question, because there's no, yeah, so the question, no, it is the question. The question is, if you have a fourplex that is then like condominiumized or, platted as townhomes, so you have individual units that are owned individually, could all 4 units then, like, if they don't own any other STR, have ownership interest, et cetera, could those all be converted and licensed? I'm vetting that through legal counsel right now because it's still a multifamily structure. And so I'm asking for that legal determination. That means that one license would still apply. If not, I'm gonna have to go back in and do some more.
Because it seems like it defeats the whole.
Totally.
So you would not support that process of
With all of the housing work we're doing, no, I would
short-term
not.
mobilization?
Yeah, correct. And I am not the one making the decisions, just to be clear, right? I report to the commissioners and I serve at their pleasure, and what they want me to do is what I do. But with all of the work that we've done, I just can't imagine, like, it's one of those questions we have to ask. But I personally would, as the director of the department responsible for the housing division, the short-term rental division, planning, building, etc., that would be very counterintuitive to all of the work we are doing holistically to address our housing needs.
But the state has no opinion.
No. Now, if they get a property tax exemption, or they get funding from the county through that multifamily housing fund, etc., we do have short-term rental or any type of transient lodging conversion prohibition as a stipulation for any of that support and those incentives. And it states transient lodging because then that also means a bed and breakfast enterprise or other types of, commercial or, transient lodging use that is not a short-term rental. So that was very intentional to tether that to transient lodging in its entirety. But no, that's the question. That's the question on Amendment 2, and I'm trying to, figure that out. So if I need to do a course correction or, an adjustment, then I'm gonna ask the board that we do that.
Would that have to be a county-wide decision, or could like Oceanside and Mesquite decide they want it to be one way and the city decide they want it to be a different way?
No, I think that's gonna be countywide. Yeah, because the program isn't applied together. So I think that's where I would, and again, just in the spirit of everything that we are trying to do for housing. That would be my ask.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
No, we only got one illustration now. Okay, so before you all leave, there is another meeting on the 23rd of July here to go over. You tell what it's
Okay, so
gonna
the
be.
23rd, is, I think we're going, so now, okay, so we've done the land use and we've done the 406 intro. The meeting on the 23rd, we're going to start putting them together as we talk about how they both apply specifically to Mesco zoning.
Right.
So you've got your land use backgrounds, now you got your 406 background, we're gonna start merging things together.
Thank you all. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Michael. And thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you again as the meetings continue.
Can we do something with the chairs? No, that's what I was wondering. Hold them up. or-
Thank you all.
Thank you, good to see you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Get it in the front porch.
Yeah, we're on.